The long-awaited sequel to Beetlejuice, entitled Beetlejuice Beetlejuice, is finally here. So let's go with the review. Beetlejuice Beetlejuice is new this week in theaters from Warner Brothers. It's directed by Tim Burton and written by Alfred Gough, Miles Millar, and Seth Grahame-Smith, from characters created by Michael McDowell and Larry Wilson. After 36 years, the ghost with the most is back. Though he only has 14 minutes of screen time, which is 30 seconds less than he did in the original, Michael Keaton returns as Beetlejuice, who's resigned to managing a call center for the recently deceased in the afterlife, which seems like a fitting and hellish punishment. The film opens with the accidental resurrection of Beetlejuice's long-dead wife, Dolores, played by Monica Bellucci, which also happens to be the worst kind of ghost, a soul sucker. And Dolores goes on a rampage to find her lost love. Meanwhile, in the world of the living, Lydia Dietz, played by Winona Ryder, is the host of a ghost hunting show and still maintains the ability to see the departed, though constant pill popping dampens that power. Don't worry, this film doesn't get that much into her drug addiction. This is a feel-good horror comedy after all. Lydia is contacted by her stepmother Delia, played by Catherine O'Hara, who bears the bad news that her father Charles, played in the original by Jeffrey Jones, has passed away. This leads Lydia to contact her estranged daughter Astrid, played by Jenna Malone, at boarding school and bring everyone back to the house on the hill for a funeral. All of these characters and more, along with many plot lines, come together to make this long-awaited sequel, Beetlejuice Beetlejuice. Like you and probably everyone around you, I loved Beetlejuice, and even though I was getting too old for the cartoons, I loved those as well. And while I'm always cynical approaching sequels and reboots of 80s properties, it seems much of the cast that made the first film so good are back, so I had higher hopes than usual about this one. Now, I'm not a fan of horror comedies, as the balance between horror and comedy is rarely made, with many horror comedies toning down the horror in order to lighten the mood and cause a laugh. But Tim Burton is cut from a different cloth. He lives a dark and morbid life, or at least grew up with one. He's able to juggle laughs and gasps deftly, even quite ingeniously at times. While his work hasn't been as impressive over the last few years, he's crafted a lot of great films in his day. You've got to admit it. Beetlejuice Beetlejuice is another one of his good ones. And I'll get into all of the good in a second, but let's get the not-so-good stuff out of the way first. Beetlejuice Beetlejuice suffers quite a bit from Batman Returns-itis, meaning there's an overabundance of distinct characters. This film is cluttered with not only a whole lot of characters, but a bunch of storylines that really don't have a lot to do with the main story. Now, Burton and his writers do a strong job of juggling these different characters and plot points, allowing their various stories to crisscross and meet at various points in the story in logical and entertaining ways. This is mainly because of the charisma of the entire cast, so I didn't mind when the film veered off and spent some time with one side plot or another, because the actors were fun to watch, and it was obvious they were enjoying themselves and giving it their all. But when they introduced Astrid's love interest, Jeremy, played by House of Dragons' Arthur Conti, and Wolf Jackson, played by the ever-awesome Willem Dafoe, as the investigator who chases after souls escaping from the afterlife, and then got into their backstories and motivation, it was then that I was beginning to feel a bit overwhelmed at the amount of story, character, and character backstory that this film tries to cram into an hour and 45 minutes. Sure, somehow Burton and company made it all fit, but I feel some characters, like Bellucci's Dolores, get the short end of the stick as she features prominently in the beginning and then disappears until the last act. Had there not been so many characters brought back from the original and new characters introduced in this one, I think the more compelling and more horrific aspects of this film, at least to me, might have given a little more time to flourish. Unfortunately, Dolores is not only scuffled off stage, but she's taken care of way too easily in the end. I also wasn't a huge fan of the soundtrack, save for the damn near perfect use of the song MacArthur Park by the late Richard Harris, a rock opera sequence which shows some of Burton's imagination maniacally untethered. It may not be as iconic as the Deo sequence in the first one, but this new musical sequence is quite a glorious watch. The rest of the soundtrack was comprised of 90s music like Stone Temple Pilots, early Sigur Rós, and the like. I just feel like anytime a pop song from whatever era is played, some Danny Elfman scores would have done the film much better. Elfman's Beetlejuice score is present, but many of the scenes, at least in the middle portion of the film, are firm with 90s nostalgia. There's a reason for the use of this era's songs in the story, but still, it took me out of the movie. Finally, in the critical department, but it's more of a curiosity than a critique, is that though Jeffrey Jones does not appear in the film as the actor has been banished from Hollywood for some very atrocious acts, his character, name, and likeness is featured prominently in the film. Now, they came up with some creative sequences to work around the appearance of Jones, but while this might be a common way to get rid of a problematic actor, most times the character's demise is mentioned and then the story moves on. Here, Jones's character Charles factors greatly into the story itself. His face is featured on the gravestone and in portrait, and his name pops up in about every other conversation. Burton might as well have brought Jones back for the amount of times he's mentioned or shown in some form in this movie. Now, if I were a suspicious man, and sometimes, who am I kidding? Often, I am, the frequency of the mention of Jones's character in this story feels like some kind of FU from Burton to the establishment for Jones's exile. I don't know anything for a fact, and I certainly am not giving Jones any kind of pass for what he did, but it just felt odd that so much time was given to this actor on screen. I'm sure Burton was friends with Jones. He did star in Beetlejuice, Ed Wood, and Sleepy Hollow after all, and maybe this was his way to stick up for the outcasted actor. I don't want to talk out of school, but with Jones's legal issues, the funeral scene with little boys singing over Charles's grave, the fact that the original Beetlejuice was all about an older man attempting to marry an underage girl, and Burton's tendency to cast young, pale brunettes in the films throughout his entire filmmaking career, well, it's something that makes you go,
You know, these aren't jokes, these are thoughts, these are things that make you say, things that make you go,
Okay, after that disturbing detour, let's move on to the positive. As I said before, everyone in the cast seems to be having the time of their lives. I mentioned the multiple plot lines and characters, but somehow, some way, Burton and his writers pull the whole thing off by the end of the movie, giving each character their own arc, things to do with the story, and scenes highlighting just what makes the actor and character they play so special to warrant a sequel all of these years later. Winona Ryder is the best she's been in ages, though I know she's already kind of made a comeback in Stranger Things. Here she feels like a big screen movie star, and I hope this reinvigorates her film career. She brings a wonderful contradiction to Lydia, who is still haunted from her encounter with Beetlejuice. Seeing her own daughter rebel against her, as Lydia did with Delia, gives a wonderful symmetry to the character. Jenna Ortega was overexposed about a year or two ago, but she's developed into a very talented actress and is giving some complex hurdles to leap. This is very much a movie that revolves around Ortega and Ryder, and they carry most of the heavy scenes on their own and easily. Catherine O'Hara has always been fun and has seen quite a bit of notoriety from her role in Schitt's Creek. I like the evolution of her character, though she still remains the same shallow artist she was in the first film. A strong subplot in both Beetlejuice and its sequel is the vapid and vile nature of the modern art scene, and Delia represents all of that well, while she still offers up a character worth caring about. And Justin Theroux has a smaller role that is less developed and more for comic effect, but he still plays Rory, a smarmy husband-to-be to Lydia, maybe too well. The film has a cameo or two that I found to be wonderful, but I won't spoil the surprises here. Finally, Michael Keaton, who, as I mentioned earlier, only appears for 14 minutes of this movie, is still ever present as the titular character. Even though a lot of the antics are revealed in the trailer, some of the best stuff is saved for the movie itself. We even get a little bit of Beetlejuice's origin story in a glorious black and white ode to Mario Bava, and maybe a little bit of Coffin Joe. The guitar solo on the model tombstone still has me laughing, and I think both Burton and Keaton realized that taking the less is more approach with the character is the best way to go. Here he pops in and out of the story long enough to be entertained, but never overstays his welcome and always leaves you itching for more. Keaton proves he's still got that megastar appeal. But as with the first film, what sets Beetlejuice apart from the rest of wannabe horror comedies is Burton's commitment to the horror of it all. There might be a darker tone in this film than the original, as Beetlejuice explores some of the other darker corners of this twisted realm of the afterlife, and sometimes the more nightmarish world of the living. As with the original, again, the afterlife sequences where the dead are forced to do labors in menial office jobs are some of the most entertaining, with one particular sequence involving an express train to move on to either heaven or hell being one of the most clever, non-PC, and funniest parts of the movie. The effects are mostly practical or rudimentary animation, and sometimes claymation. Still, it manages to be quite gory and goopy, even though this is a PG-13 rated film. I was kind of surprised at the amount of gore and grue Burton got away with. And yes, Bob the Shrunken Head character and his shrunken head counterparts almost steal the show this time, as he did in the original. Criticisms to cringy subtext aside, Beetlejuice is one hell of a fun ride. It's not perfect, but it's legions better than most of the other modern reboots of old nostalgic properties. There are a few callbacks, but for the most part, this is just a new story with some of your favorite characters from the original, which is really what I want to see in a sequel like this. Keaton and the rest of the cast bring their best, and while the plot is full and abundant, it manages to keep it all together by the end. Now, I hope the powers that be won't rush a follow-up, as the third installment feels inevitable. I mean, how can they not make a Beetlejuice? But if enough talent, imagination, passion, and most importantly, energy is put into another one, I'll be there for it. Please do me a favor and punch that like button down below. Share this video with all of your social media addicted pals. Click subscribe to this channel and ring that bell for notifications.
You're doomed to live the life you're meant to be, stuck inside your reality. You're doomed. Oh, you're doomed. You're doomed. Live the life that you are meant to be. Live inside.